Today, we're going to be looking at the possibility of applying to the Lands Tribunal, the Upper Tribunal Lands Chamber, I should say, to modify or discharge any covenant restrictive of user of land. So we're going to be looking at the applications for that modification or discharge of a covenant restrictive of user of land. And we're going to be looking at the points to consider. We're then going to, or some of the points to consider before you even think about making an application. We're then going to look at the application grounds, but in particular, we're going to be looking at the most common application grounds, ground little a, that the covenant is obsolete, and ground little double a, that the covenant impedes some reasonable user of the land and secures no practical benefit of substantial value or advantage, or that the covenant is contrary to public interest. And then we're going to look at the end at some of the sort of further problems with regard to further restrictions that might be imposed, and how, if you're applying to have the covenant modified, you might want to think about what sort of further restrictions would you be prepared to have over the land. And we'll also be looking at costs. E-tenants, use class E-tenants, so medical purposes or office purposes. And the question before the tribunal is, given that there isn't an assignee standing in the wings, can you say that the covenant impedes some reasonable use? Yes, says the tribunal. There's no principle that the applicant must have a definite project in mind, particularly with regard to leasehold applications, although I think for freehold land, you're probably going to have a definite project in mind. Although in the Darab case, of course, they didn't have planning, but they had a likelihood of getting planning. Use for medical purposes is reasonable, a user, as it will remain, says the tribunal, on the basis of the evidence, difficult to let for the permitted shop and showroom use, whilst the premises could readily be let for use for some medical purpose. And so the tribunal is saying that modifying the covenant would allow the property to be let, but the current covenant impedes some reasonable user because under the current covenant it's either got to be shop and showroom or use class order B1, and what's required is use class order E, which is for medical purposes or for office purposes. And so the applicant, which is here not a developer, it is the tenant, has hit that hurdle. Yes, reasonable user. And then the question is there a practical benefit of substantial value or advantage to the person with the benefit of the covenant, which in this case is the landlord? And the landlord says, yes, there is a practical benefit, because if you didn't modify this covenant, I could say to the tenant, you can use it for medical purposes. I will allow that to happen, and I'd be able to get a premium for that change to the user clause.